not here can learn from you despite that. But we have a bunch of new faces, so I will just go ahead and introduce Ellie and I, and then we'll introduce Keiko. My name is Emily Blackshire. My partner in this expedition, Ellie Nixon, and I started this group in June, sort of as a way of facilitating conversations about racism and like systemic forms of oppression and whiteness with white people who wanted to learn more, but didn't want to really know where to start, and certainly didn't want to like put that weight on our Black friends and neighbors and our Indigenous friends and neighbors. And we've kind of grown from there. We started as a newsletter and a dialogue series, and we've had a like burgeoning speaker series over the past couple months. And we are so excited to host Keiko Cooley tonight. Keiko and I met thanks to Chloe, who's also on this call, at the Women's March in Greenville a couple years ago. And I've just kind of been in awe ever since. And every Black History Month, Keiko posts like the most comprehensive, bite-sized, but like really deep resources that are kind of covering everything that you don't learn about Black history in school. And because we were doing this, we were like, Keiko feels like such a natural fit to bring in and kind of learn from in this experience. So we are so excited to have you here today. A little bit more background. She is an HBCU alumna. She went to Claflin University. And she's also a fourth year medical student in Greenville, South Carolina now. She is going to be the first Black urology resident in her residency next year, which is just like mind-blowing for a lot of reasons. I think we can all unpack those like in our own heads. And she's like really attuned to urologic oncology, patient education, medical education. I mean, if you have followed her on social media or you know her in real life, you know that she is like a huge proponent of mentorship and humility and perseverance. And she just like embodies all of those characteristics. She also works out, like has an amazing workout plan I see all the time. And she's kind of my go-to when something is medically wrong with me. So I'm very thankful to have her as my Instagram doctor and my friend and someone in this space who I learned so much from, like across a range of ideas. So Keiko, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are like really lucky to have you here. And I guess to get us started, we, like I said, we have seen so much of your Black History Month content come across our screens on Instagram and in real life. And you just really like clearly care so much about Black History Month. And I'm kind of curious how that got its start. Like, we all care about Black History Month, but you like really know so much of that. So can you share with us a little bit about that origin and journey to where you are now?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, but my paternal grandmother, her name is Annie Larson. She was like very involved in the civil rights movement and things like that when it like back in her heyday. And she even door knocked for Jesse Jackson when he was running for president. And that was something that the United States government actually wasn't in support of. And she actually ended up on the CIA's watch list because of that. And she was the one who first taught me about like the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and all those people. And then it was really important to me to go to a historically Black college. Graduated from Claflin, but at historically Black colleges, it is a required course that everybody takes African American studies. It's your first year. It is a course that you will absolutely take. And I'd never been exposed to it outside of Black History Month and my grandmother. And there was just so much information that I just had never heard of and had never seen. And throughout my time at Claflin, I really feel like the pro-Blackness that I have, the emphasis that I carry with me about advancing the Black community and teaching the Black community was really molded and shaped at Claflin University. There were people there who like already had those ideals because they grew up in cities like DC, where it's like predominantly Black, and they have like all of these amazing Black professionals and have like annual Juneteenth parades and have lots of programming for Black History Month. And so it was really a connection between relationships and like bridging the information that I got from my childhood, from my grandmother, and Claflin.
That is so, so cool.
That's so amazing. Keiko, it's such a pleasure to have you. And I'm so grateful that we're able to have this conversation during Black History Month. But I think the emphasis on this, just understanding that we have to come to as a country that all months should be Black History Month all the time. But we're so grateful to have you specifically during our recognized Black History Month. What's your first memory of learning about Black History Month in school growing up before you went off and did it in a greater scale like you were just discussing? And was this different from things that you were learning?
So I feel like my first memory was it was at Washington Elementary in East Chicago, Indiana. And we were singing a song, and we had on and then we did like similar programming in the church that I went to. And we would like wear these kente stoles and like the little kente hats, and would be singing songs. And what I found throughout all of my primary education was that it always just seemed very superficial, and that we only learned about the same people over and over again. And so something that I think is really important to say is that I don't know all the stuff that I post. There are times in January where I'll like put up a little box and I'm like, what do you guys want to learn about this year for Black History Month? And I have some people who are really faithful and will respond every year and tell me various topics. I have a very good friend, Jamal Bowie, who is also very in tune into Black history, and he always submits. And it was just curious to me that we had to learn about Harriet Tubman every year, and Malcolm X every year, and Martin Luther King Jr. every year. And so those are my memories of Black History Month as a child. And it was really different than what my grandmother was teaching me. And I think that has to do with the fact that she had a firsthand lived experience, and she very literally helped to shape some history in the Midwest. She was a nurse and helped to integrate a hospital. And so the things that she told me, and knowing about the marches that she participated in and the demonstrations that she completed, showed me that there was information missing.
Yeah, I feel like you have it from so many angles of like this very rich family history, like very radical, very like close to where the action has been happening for so long, but also with that perspective, you know that the story doesn't end at MLK and Malcolm X and Harriet Tubman. Like, they are individuals who played a very important role, but like they're not the only ones, which, I mean, I don't know, growing up in a white home in a majority white school, like I had such a limited knowledge anyway, but how amazing for you to have that perspective even as a kid, and then go on to Claflin and have it broadened even more is just so powerful to me. And we've kind of talked in our newsletter, like at the very beginning of the month, about the history of Black History Month, but I know that you certainly know more than we do about that. Can you like chat with us a little bit about how Black History Month got its start?
Yeah, so it was actually started by Carter G. Woodson, and it was inspired by the celebration of Juneteenth, which is an annual celebration on June 19th every year. And that is when the last enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, actually found out that they were being illegally still enslaved, and that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed. And so this was a celebration that he went to in Chicago, and he was just like, well, maybe we should do something else, at another time of the year. And so within the Black community, there were already celebrations for President Lincoln's birthday on February the 12th. And then W.E.B. Du Bois, however you want to say his last name, his birthday is also in the month of February, which is it's actually in a couple of days, February 23rd. And so Black History Month actually started as Negro History Week, and was started in between those two dates. Carter G. Woodson felt like there was a lot of Black history that was positive that wasn't really being highlighted. And so it started really like as a grassroots movement is what we would call it today. And there were mayors throughout throughout the country who bought into the idea of Black history and the importance of Black history. And informally, prior to 1967, when it was deemed by the United States government to be celebrated throughout the whole month, there were cities throughout the country who were already celebrating Black history through the entire month of February. But President Ford in 1967, I believe it was 1967, said that we as a country were doing a disservice to the Black Americans of the country by not recognizing their contributions, and decided to make Black History Week or Negro History Week into Black History Month. And since that time, annually, actually, there's like a theme for Black History Month. And this year's theme, I had to look it up, is Black family representation, identity and diversity. And it's really celebrating and examining the diaspora throughout the country and how Black families look and how they're different and things like that.
That is incredible. And thank you for sharing that. I knew some of that, but definitely not all. And I think that's why these conversations are so important, because there is such kind of a gap in what many white people do know and don't know. And not just white people, I think people in general. But one question I had for you, just hearing all these amazing facts that you have, is what would you say is the most incredible Black history fact that you've learned? Well, this year or in general?
So this year it's probably between the history of Black people dapping each other up, or like the handshake, mm-hmm. and learning that there was a second Underground Railroad, and that the Underground Railroad that we think of when we think of the Underground Railroad and the enslaved escaping to go to Canada or Northern America was actually the second Underground Railroad. The first one was actually down into Florida, where the Spanish had a settlement where they deemed any enslaved person who arrived at that settlement to be freed. And so that's how we think about like having Afro-Latinas and Afro-Hispanic people down in Florida, and like how did this happen? Well, that's part of how it happened. But I have a friend who is pursuing family medicine. Her name is Corey, and she posted this little video of some Black soldiers that were over in Vietnam, and they were talking about the racism that they were experiencing and how the Vietnamese knew racial slurs that were specific to our country. And it was in that video that I saw them doing, like, dapping each other up and doing a handshake, and I'd never seen it like that intricate before, and then looked it up and found out that that's where it started. And it was because there were many incidents where white soldiers were attacking Black soldiers, and so they formed a pact with one another.
Wow.
That is so interesting, because I'd seen that in your stories, and we put it in the newsletter a couple weeks ago about like the history of dignity and pride. Was that it? Yeah. And Black soldiers in Vietnam, but I didn't even cross my mind to think that like what the Vietnamese soldiers were probably perceiving of like Black soldiers being drafted to fight in the Vietnam War on behalf of the United States and being mistreated by the people who like they're serving alongside. That's just, yeah. Wow. Thank you for that piece of context too, because that just would have gone over my head, admittedly. But when we touched base the first time and kind of talked about this, and we're tossing through ideas of like what we could talk about for Black History Month, and you know, you have so much knowledge of these things. You mentioned two things that were really interesting that like I don't really know much about. I bet a lot of us here probably don't know much about, but one was the Pan-African flag, and two, you mentioned the Negro National Anthem, and you told an interesting story about a classmate like interacting with the term Negro National Anthem. And so I'd love to hear kind of first Pan-African flag context and story, and then also anything about the Negro National Anthem I'm like really intrigued by. Also, like as a white person, should I be saying that? Like genuinely, I would love any context on that.
Yeah. So the Pan-African flag was designed and adopted by the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which was founded by Marcus Garvey, who was what we would call now a Black separatist. And so he believed that Black people and people of the diaspora should be completely separate from other people like other people in the country, so much so that he actually had a Back to Africa movement. Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican-born man, came to the United States in 1914 after traveling and learning various things. And in the year 1900, there was a song that was created, and it said that every race has a flag but the coon. When I found out about this song, it was actually the summer that Dylan Roof murdered the people, the Emanuel 9 in Charleston, and I protested the Confederate flag outside the State House with my Pan-African flag. And the song was at the time showing how, even though people of the diaspora were free and American citizens, just as everybody else said, there were people in the country who didn't even consider them to be somebody who should consider the American flag their own. And so Marcus Garvey saw that as an issue, in addition to the fact that there just wasn't a unifying banner for the people of the Black diaspora. And as people who have like a sovereign nation, he thought that it was important and was like a sign of political maturity, or a sign that Black people have come together and are ready to progress through various political talks and leanings, that Black people should have a flag. And so there are three colors in the flag. There's black, red, and green. The black signifying the people of diaspora, red signifying the blood of the people, but also the blood of the people that was shed in trying to gain liberation. And then the green being like the natural fertility of the continent of Africa. And something that I found to be like really cool when I first learned about the flag is that various African countries adopted the flag, red, the black, and the green horizontally as their template for their flag after they were gaining their independence from various nations. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And the Negro National Anthem was actually created by two brothers, the Johnson brothers. So there was a poem that was written, and then the other brother placed it to music. And it's also called the Black National Anthem, or Lift Every Voice. If you were to go and pull up the lyrics, Lift Every Voice and Sing is actually how the song starts. And it's an amazing song. I encourage everybody to look up the lyrics, go and take a listen on YouTube when we get done. It's really about a song about like overcoming and keeping faith and leaning on God to progress through like dark times. That song was like really thrust into the spotlight when Beyonce sang part of it during Beachella. And that's when that conversation came up with one of our classmates. I think that there is an idea or thought that Negro is synonymous to the racial slur. And it's not the same. It wouldn't be necessarily appropriate to call somebody your Negro friend, but it is not, it does not hold the same connotation that the racial slur has. Calling the song the Negro National Anthem is completely correct. And previously there were organizations that had the word Negro in them. They have since dropped it to become more inclusive or to change it to Black, because throughout time, my grandmother actually made a joke about this, about like Black people not knowing what they want to be called. So like Afro-American, Afro-American, African-American, Black, Negro, like all of these things are synonymous, and it's just something that changes with the time.
I guess the question would be, would you say it's more culturally sensitive if white people are referring to it to call it Black national anthem versus Negro national anthem? Is it, as you're saying, it's synonymous, but if there's that moment where somebody hears you say that word and might associate it with a negative connotation coming from a white person, would you, I suppose, recommend a specific term for white people to use?
So I am going to answer this question as myself. I would be comfortable hearing a white person say Negro National Anthem because that's how I grew up, like referring to the song. And I have an appreciation for the fact that Negro and the racial slur are not synonymous.
Right.
If someone were starting an interaction with somebody that they weren't close with, then I think that it may be more appropriate to say Black because there are people that view those words as synonyms.
Got it. Thank you.
And I mean,
kind of weird navigating the waters of like political correctness, but also wanting to appreciate the history, as you were just saying, and call it by the adequate term.
And I think that you like raise one of the most important points that we are always going back to, but like Black people do not, like as individual people, do not have to speak for their entire race. Like whatever is correct for you is like totally fair and valid. And if someone else has an emotional reaction to that, like we can be conscientious enough to change our language to make the people in our presence like feel safe. But I really appreciate your like from the beginning acknowledgement of that, because I think sometimes like even me saying Negro National Anthem to begin that question, I was like, will I like, and I think it's okay that we are like stumbling and looking for the right thing. I think that we try to find line of like, we don't need to assume that all Black people are going to speak for all Black people every time that they are interacting with us about language, and like we can modify as we go. But thank you for that point, because I think that like sometimes it's easy to be like, well, Keiko said it was okay, so it's okay. And like it is for Keiko, but like, yeah, thank you for that.
100%.
Sort of on a different note, we were just curious, who are some of your most favorite and most admired Black historical figures that either we might all have heard of or some that we maybe haven't?
Yeah, so there is the first African American or Black female physician in the country was Rebecca Lee Crumpler, and I actually have I have various photos in my apartment, and one of her pictures is up on my wall. Yeah, like I just think so. She was actually born free, and then followed around, I believe it was her aunt, when her aunt would make house calls as a nurse. And then she became a physician at a school that was eventually closed down when it was an all women's medical college. And all of those were closed around the same time that many of the historically Black colleges and universities, medical colleges were closed. There was a report that was released that prompted that, but she is definitely one of my favorites. Malcolm X is also one of my favorites. I think that his story and how he transitioned throughout his life is one of the most amazing things that I've ever encountered. And a really funny story is like while I was on my residency interviews this past season, it was actually with an Ivy League institution, and the program chair, the chair of the department, asked me who I would like to emulate as a leader. And I was just like, well, I would like to say that many people view this man as a radicalist and that he is not painted well throughout history. I said, but I think that he embodies all of the best traits of a leader. I said, and I just want to say that before I tell you what my answer is. And then he leaned in and I said, it's Malcolm X. And he was just like, great, love it. Tell me why, because he's mine as well. And I was just I was taken aback, mind blown, because it was this bald, like, white man. He's probably like 5'7", and he was just so excited that we had the same leader in mind. And I told him that Malcolm X was somebody, one, who was incredibly intelligent, read the entire dictionary, and internalized, I feel like, a great majority of it, because his vocabulary was amazing and his ability to orate is second to nearly none. And then when he was like presented with new information that challenged his thoughts, he dissected it in a way that would challenge who he believed to be this amazing leader. And he didn't allow that fondness of his leader to blind him. And how he was able to change his thinking and then apply that and then change the thinking of the people who were following him. I think those are all incredible marks of a wonderful leader. So Malcolm X, definitely. And then Nina Simone and James Baldwin, because both of them just used their craft in such a way that I think is incredibly remarkable. The hoodie that I have on, it says "To Be Young and Black," and Nina Simone has a song called "Young, Gifted, and Black," and it was like this battle cry for the young people that were a part of the movement at the time. And I just loved how she was unafraid to use her platform, and to use her platform both on stage and off stage to advance Black people. And James Baldwin's critiques of the country and of the people are some of the most intellectually pleasing, we would call them reads now, that I have ever had the pleasure to hear or read. And I really admire his use of language.
I love all of those answers. I have been down a Nina Simone rabbit hole the past couple months, because there's an episode of Radio Lab where Tracy Hunt, who's just like an incredible radio producer, but she deep dives on Nina Simone and her music as like a symbol to get us through COVID and all of the adversity that this past year has offered, and getting through really hard times. Her music was made for hard times to find the joy. And I love her so much. So I mean, all of those answers are amazing, but I especially loved that one. Yeah. So kind of a question that's not really switching gears, but a little bit switching gears, because the majority of our readers are white. We kind of started this as a white affinity group to, be having hard conversations about race so that people could go back out into the world and do less damage. Little bit more morbid sounding when I just said that than how I think it actually is, but something we really need to reckon with is white people, well-intentioned, doing damage. Regardless, we have been kind of grappling over the past couple months with how should white people be showing up for Black History Month, in appreciation of Black culture, in spaces that are historically Black, protest spaces, or spaces where we are in the minority all of a sudden. I guess, especially around Black History Month and honoring Black culture, how would you as Keiko, and how do you think it would be most useful, least damaging, white people to be appreciating Black history and culture without appropriating Black history and culture and incorporating it into every month of our lives and not just February?
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing that white people can do to help, incorporate Black history and appreciation for Black culture is to learn. And another big thing is to believe someone when they're discussing their lived experiences. Lived experiences and feelings are really synonymous in the sense that you can't really tell somebody that they're wrong. Our past experience shapes the lens through which we view the world. And I think that it is important to appreciate the sensitivity and the lens that many Black people have, particularly those who are descendants of American slavery, because there's like a quote that likes to say that we're a nation of immigrants. Well, that's not necessarily true for everybody, because there's an entire demographic that is here in this country because they were forcibly brought here. And those of us that are descendants of American slavery, in that forcible relocation, lost our culture that we would like to say is like African culture, lost names, lost languages, lost food. And so I think taking the time to learn, maybe like picking a Black author and reading a book every month, to see how varied the diaspora is and how they interpret information and how they interpret the world is important. So we talked about Marcus Garvey a little bit, and there were many people who didn't believe in Black separatism. Like W.E.B. Du Bois, he was a proponent of integration. He was married a couple of times, and his last wife was white. But Garvey is somebody who was completely opposed and actually like received like an endorsement, so to speak, from the KKK, because they also felt like Black people should be somewhere else. And so I think reading and learning is the best thing that anybody can do for a topic that they don't know and understand. As far as appropriating culture, I know that we like to think that a lot of the language that we see on Twitter and social media platforms are like exclusive to Twitter and social media platforms, but the truth behind it is a lot of it is African American vernacular English, or it's also called Ebonics, or Black vernacular English. And I communicate like that with my family, with my friends, and hearing and seeing someone trying to communicate in that way and not really appreciating or knowing that it's an entire dialect of standard American English and not following grammar rules and context, etc., is off-putting and incredibly puzzling. Because what will then happen is I've had people tell me that I'm speaking an entire dialect of American English incorrectly. And I was really excited because it was last year at some point, there was a teacher who was saying that in primary education, that there really isn't an appreciation for the fact that Black students are just as bilingual as Hispanic students and just as bilingual as Chinese American students, because I can have an entire conversation with one of my classmates in the presence of other classmates who don't speak African American vernacular English and not know what's being said. And so I think appreciating and knowing when you're encountering Black culture, and when you should not try and take on that mantle is important.
That's so fascinating to hear the way that you just phrased that, because we actually talked about this pretty early on in our dialogue group, and this idea that the same way people who are super quick to appropriate and use exactly what you just said, terms from AAVE in their everyday language without understanding that, like, as white people, we can do that without the potential consequences of speaking in a way that some people have deemed historically as like unintelligent, or like our white supremacy culture has essentially used to keep Black people out of certain spaces because of that language. And so just like understanding the difference between why, like when we're using terms from that as white people, we can then be, it's understood when white people are doing it that that's not how they speak, and they're just, taking on a certain space, but they're obviously wouldn't ever speak that way, grammatically incorrect, or however we've been deeming it. And so that's actually something as a teacher that I've been really, really focusing on in my classroom, and understanding that when I'm grading a student's paper, of course, there's certain standards that colleges and institutions are going to be looking for my students, and they still need to engage with their material and their classwork and their writing in a specific way for now. But understanding that I, as a white person, cannot tell a student they're grammatically incorrect if they're speaking in AAVE or writing in AAVE has been really enlightening and helpful in my career. So I appreciate you sharing that with us so much. Kind of also on that same light, how would you like to see white and non-Black allies confronting racism when they see it? And could you also talk to us about the bystander effect?
Yeah. So I think what's really important about racism, and it was a very, I feel like, poignant quote that I heard, and it was just that racism isn't a Black problem to fix. Racism and the white supremacy culture that you were speaking of is not something that was created by Black people. And thusly, though Black people have been crying out for years and requesting for years for something to be done for centuries, it will take the buy-in of white people. And so there was a talk that I was on, and it was like the state of the world, and someone asked, like, what do I do if I've never done this before? The first time that I had a racially based encounter, I had no idea what to do, but I also knew that I didn't want this person to speak to me that way or to speak about Black people that way. There really isn't a handbook, but I think it's important also to note that there are experiences that people will have that others will not validate until a white person says something about it. And so knowing that, you will have like a sympathetic response. Your heart rate is going to go up. You are going to get flushed in the face. You may feel like your voice is shaking, but I assure you it will go away. And that person who experienced or is experiencing that racial encounter will have a moment of relief, knowing that they don't have to stick up for themselves in that moment. There have been a number of incidents that I've had every year, actually, since I've been in medical college. And I can't immediately think of any incident until this year when somebody like offered to stick up for me or stuck up for me. There was an issue that I had with a resident, and I told my chief resident about it, and she is from Pennsylvania. And she was just like, this is something that I will not tolerate on my service. She was like, I know you can't say anything because you're a student. She was just like, but if you want me to say something, I will do it. She was like, because this is inappropriate and this is not something that I will tolerate on my service ever. And that was the first time where when I was telling somebody about an experience that was based solely on my Blackness, that they immediately came to action and thought of how to help me. The bystander effect is something that we as a country saw be heavily examined in the 60s and the 70s. Unfortunately, there was an attack while a woman was like trying to go home from work, and 38 people either heard or saw this woman getting attacked. And it wasn't until after that she died that one of those 38 people called the authorities. The man who attacked her left twice and came back every time. He was like scared off by lights or scared off by sounds, but came back every time because nobody called. And what we found is that in a group, we are less likely to help somebody, even in an emergency, because there's this idea that, oh, that other person over there is going to say something. Oh, I'm sure this other person thinks this is wrong also, and they'll do something about it. It's interesting looking at the data because the individual addition of a single person doesn't have an effect, but we know for a fact that in a large group that people are less likely. There are lots of different theories around how people decide when to do something in an emergency, but ultimately it comes down to the fact that people have to recognize that racism, microaggressions, overt racism, I think those are all like small emergencies, right? Because you don't know how that experience is going to impact and shape the way that person is seeing themselves for the rest of their life. You have no idea what your intervention could do for them. It was a very big culture shock for me when I came from Gary, Indiana, which is one of the most densely populated cities of Black people in the country, and then went to a historically Black college, and then came to University of South Carolina in Greenville. It was an incredibly jarring experience. And I had to take time to like sit down and think about the friendships that I had as a child and whether or not my childhood friends probably had some of the same ideals and thoughts of my classmates. And I think that I say all that to say all of these experiences that we have shape the lens that somebody will see the world through for the rest of our lives. And there are people that will say, well, you know, I wasn't alive when slavery happened. I wasn't alive during Jim Crow. Why is this my responsibility? I feel like it's our responsibility to our fellow man to make the world a better place and to ensure that they don't continue to see harm. And so I would just impress upon everybody to be fearless. It's easy to stand back and to make yourself small. The bigger thing that you can do, the more courageous thing that you can do is stand up for somebody when it seems like they're not going to stand up for themselves, or beating them to when they would stand up for themselves. I would love for people to take on some of the conversations that I've had to take on. But when there are things that come up, there's silence in the room. And I would not be able to sleep well at night. I would not be able to look myself in the mirror and say that I did something that aligned with who I was as a person if I let some of these things just sit in silence.
Keiko, like you saying racism is a small emergency every time it happens will stay with me for the rest of my life. Like that is such a powerful framework, because you're so right. Like so many of us want to believe that when we see someone hurt in front of us, that we will either get help or we will help or we will jump in some way. And help with racism is so loaded with white people and white saviorism. But I do think that most of us do think like, if we see injustice happening before us, we will intervene. And so often that's just not the case. And I think that like framing it as these are like real consequences in people's lives who are experiencing racism, like that is real, that can stick with you forever. And we've seen how like small acts of racism can escalate so quickly. And so like treating those as like micro emergencies is kind of like the most important thing we can do in these actions. And like, I don't know, I just thank you for that framework and for that language, because I really do think that that's like kind of what we have to do to take up the call. And obviously like there's a lot of white saviorism that we need to unpack on our side about those things too. But being able to say like, it is not okay that you just like mentioned someone's hair in a derogatory way in front of me is also like confronting a small emergency. And so like, thank you for that. And Keiko, like you do so much. You are a medical student. You are talking to us now. You like run the most baller Instagram page for the whole month of February. You're like always on, you're writing poetry, you're working out, you're up at 5. I see it almost every day. Like how do you self-care? How do you take care of you?
So working out is actually a really big part of that. I have a very good friend. Her name is Leanne Black. It was my first year of medical school. She was about to compete in like a bodybuilder competition. And she was just like, Keiko, I'm losing steam. Work out with me. And I was just like, Okay, but I love it now. It's like my most quiet time of the day, and I say that ironically because I always have music and my headphones are always in. But it is the time of day where I can sit and think, like when I'm rowing, and just examine what I want to do throughout the day, things that happened the day prior. Poetry is also a form of self-care for me. I also use poetry as a way to process. I was talking to my aunt last night, I think it was, about the poem that I wrote after I witnessed my first patient die, after like helping do compressions and CPR on them and everything. And that was a big experience for me. Another big experience for me that happened last summer was when I correctly advised a college classmate to go to the hospital, and later her baby was born via emergency C-section. That was another huge experience for me. And so I've always been a very introspective person, and so I can like sit and think in a room and just find that restorative, but also working out and also poetry.
All of these answers have just been so incredible, and I'm just so grateful that you're here and sharing all of your wealth of knowledge with us. And definitely want to open up the conversation to anyone on this call who has questions for you. If we're ready to make that jump, I think I'm sure that everyone has questions for you, because you have just been so fabulous and insightful.
Thank you guys for having me. This has been amazing.
Yeah, you're amazing.
Come every week and we'd be like, we have so much to learn. And if you do have questions, feel free to just unmute yourself or drop them in the chat.
Feel like the bystander effect is happening where everyone feels like someone else is going to ask the question. So I will be the one to ask the first. I know you touched on it earlier when you spoke of Lee Crumpler, the first Black female physician. But as you mentioned, like there's certain figures in Black history who are highlighted more in schools, you know, across America, especially, you know, elementary, middle school. Is beyond, you know, Lee as your example, like, is there anyone that you would want to introduce to every classroom, you know, across America, if there was someone you could ensure, you know, especially in some, you know, middle America locations where it's the same few people, as you mentioned, that are being taught over and over again, that you think would be really impactful?
I would love it if everybody could learn about the Black Panther Party. Um, they are thought of as being this radical organization who like hated all white people. And some people would even say that they wanted to kill all white people, and even say they wanted to kill all police officers and law enforcement. And that really wasn't a thing at all. Another great quote that I've heard in the past is that being pro-Black is not being anti-white. There are lots of systems in place that oppress Black people, and the Black Panther Party came into existence to try and address the failings of those systems, and trying to protect Black people throughout the country. They had a free lunch program. They there's a diagram that talks about a hierarchy of needs, and when you meet someone's basic needs, they are more likely to agree with whatever you're saying, and to buy into what you were doing. And not only did the Black Panther Party meet a lot of like practical needs for Black families: shelter, food, education, like furthering the like skills of Black people and things like that, but they also were proponents of Black empowerment and Black liberation, and exposing Black people to the idea that they could create an organized system and economy for themselves, and they wouldn't have to deal with racism on an everyday basis. I would love if everybody learned about the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, that is a great answer. Also, following up on that, have you seen Judas and the Black Messiah yet? Because it is on my watch list if I can get to a movie theater somewhere near me.
Yes, I have not seen it yet. But the Fred Hampton House, very ironically, they were actually in need. I was talking to a friend about this last night. They were in need of money to keep the foundation going. And the Judas and the Black Messiah made a lot of money. And the Hampton House is in need. So I have lots of feelings around, So I have lots of feelings around watching it. I am going to watch it because I have heard that it's amazing. But I was just like, why didn't they help them?
I know, maybe we should like go be a bug in Daniel Kaluuya's ear or something.
Maybe.
That's good to know.
Other questions, comments, anything for Keiko?
I just really appreciated you bringing up Malcolm X, because I grew up in the Georgia public education system, and I grew up like Martin Luther King, like pedestal, like very whitewashed education of Martin Luther King. And then we had the antithesis, who was Malcolm X, and like it was just very interesting. I actually have his autobiography is like right here. You've spurred me to read it now. It's been sitting, it's like the next one up on my book stack. So I appreciate that. But that just made me, like, I've been really doing a lot of unlearning, like that phrase is used a lot, obviously, but like unlearning when it comes to especially Malcolm X and Black History Month in general. And I don't know if anyone else ever grew up watching the movie My Friend Martin. It's like a very badly animated, like 90s like take on, I think it was made to help like elementary school students like understand the civil rights movement. And I like found it on YouTube the other day, and I was just like, this was my education for like the most developmental years of my life. Which, you know, at 24, like it's good to recognize that now. But yeah, I just really appreciate this and what you said tonight and everything. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually rereading his autobiography right now. It was the first book report I did.
Dang, how old were you that you were doing a book report on the autobiography of Malcolm X?
This is a very intense child. Very intense. I think it was like the 3rd grade.
Keiko, how? You like amaze me for so many reasons, but like
it was so the 3rd grade was like the same time that Harry Potter came out, and I wasn't allowed. And so I spent, it was a very, you know, the Harry Potter book, that's a long book to break up for children for like circle and reading time. And so I would go to the library during that time, and I read the autobiography of Malcolm X instead.
In the 3rd grade, casually.
Just real casually.
That's amazing.
Keiko, I am very impressed, very proud of you. And it's like I've been shut house. I've reading and read Malcolm X years ago and again, and I through all the Black movies, Black books, all the Black talks, and I have learned a lot about people. And it's been amazing. But I'll have to go and check out the Black Panthers because I haven't gotten into them yet. So I'll have to check them out.
Thank you, Auntie.
Hello, everyone. So Emily and Eliana, if I'm saying that correctly, I want to first thank you for bringing on Keiko and a group of, I think this is so forward moving to have a group of diverse individuals here to actually, Haley mentioned the word unlearning, but I think even as African Americans, Blacks, we all are unlearning. And Keiko mentioned a very, very empowering for me and empowering maybe for others powerful statement about Blacks being English language learners as well. For years, if I heard her correctly, for years, I think many Blacks were not aware that they were code switching when they would enter into other areas of their profession. So Keiko, thank you for that, because sometimes dignity is definitely lost in certain professions or just around, even socially. Can you speak to how you have held on to your, I don't know if you use Black vernacular. I certainly know you don't use the term Ebonics, but how have you had to, with that dichotomy of language, how have you held on to, or maybe annihilated the language and the roots of the Black English from Gary, Indiana to now where you're going to be a resident?
So I am very fortunate that there are people in my class, there are other Black people in my class who also code switch and also see value in staying connected with their Blackness. Also, I have friends who are not involved in medicine at all, but are still professionals, and they also code switch. My friend Jamal Bowie, he's on here right now. Hey, Bowie. He actually submitted, I spoke about him earlier, but he submitted that we should talk about the Lincoln Motion Picture Company. And that was something that we talked about that I posted on my story this year. And then also, I think that for me, recognizing as I've gotten older and appreciating how powerful Black culture is and how wide reaching it is, that gives me great pride and great joy to be a part of that culture and to be a member of the diaspora. I speak in AAVE every day. With my friends and classmates, with my younger sister. Even when, and I spoke on this a little bit earlier, but my grandmother, she of course speaks standard English, but she'll also speak African-American vernacular English. And it's just a normal way of communication for us.
I love it.
So I'm kind of curious because I learned, admittedly too late, but relatively recently, that it is a microaggression for white people to tell a Black person that like they're doing something eloquently, or if they're speaking in a specific way that would suggest we're surprised when they're intelligent. And as someone who is extraordinarily intelligent like yourself, do you find that off-putting when you've heard that in your circles from white people? And I guess, is there a difference between somebody who's acknowledging your intelligence and somebody who, there obviously is a difference, but is it noticeable rather if somebody's like shocked, or they're just simply complimenting your intelligence?
It is 100% noticeable. I find it to be incredibly noticeable. I have another friend who's on here, Michael O'Brien, and we were talking about my ability to orate, and he was just like, Keiko, you have to realize, like, you speak, like you literally speak very well. Like our classmates do not speak as well as you do. I also read the dictionary. That is something from childhood. I was working in Columbia at a neurologist's office, and I used the word tome. It's not a big word, I used the word tome. And this patient was just like, oh my goodness, I am so excited that you know that word. She was like, you speak very well. And so hearing that is completely different than someone saying, like, I really enjoyed how you orated that speech. Right. And so when there's a look of surprise on someone's face, that's immediately, to me, that's off-putting, because though it is a dialect and its own language, we all also know standard American English.
Thank you for speaking to that, because I do think there's a difference But I'm sure as someone who is as intelligent as yourself, you must get complimented on that all the time. And so just thinking about the nuances of like, well, you want to tell someone how amazing and intelligent they are and how well they speak, as you were just saying, but also you wouldn't ever want it to be the intent versus impact. Like somebody may have the intention of complimenting your intelligence, but the impact is that it's coming across like you wouldn't be because of the color of your skin or something along those lines.
My god sister Chelsea, she also she was on here earlier. She also has to remind me of that.
Yeah. I mean, Keiko, you are arguably one of the best orators I've ever heard. Like, and I'm not just saying that as like a person, like my peer, like someone in my life, like you don't even say ever. Like, but so I'm imagining both because of that and because you are just brilliant, but also you're in a lot of majority white spaces right now where I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like, you speak so well, sweetie, that yeah.
And Keiko, this is your granny. And I just want to say, excellent presentation. You're doing a great job. I'm just cut off and letting you know I'm listening. Love you, baby.
Oh, thank you, Grandma. I love you too.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are at 8 o'clock, a little past 8 o'clock. So just before people pop off, you can follow along with Keiko anywhere here. You can also Venmo her if you're interested in dropping some tips. We pay our speakers for coming to see us, but we don't make any money. If you're interested in like following along with anything Unlearning Racism is doing, we have a newsletter that comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and we host dialogues and things, and you're always welcome to join. But we will stay on. Keiko, you're welcome to stay on as long as you'd like to talk to people who are here, just answer more questions, whatever. We just want to honor your time, like, and whatever else you know, if you want to plug anything else, feel free to.
No, I don't have anything else to plug. Thank you so much. This is amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this was seriously incredible. I want to reiterate that and appreciate your time so much.
Absolutely. I'm gonna just hang out with you guys for a little bit.
I love it. I love it. Feel free, anyone, to jump in and ask any questions or, you know, pop off.
I have one more question to ask. Do you feel most comfortable speaking in AAVE? That's or like, do you feel equally comfortable speaking in each sense? I was also thinking about like interracial relationships and how like you would feel comfortable speaking to if you were in a relationship with a white person at your own home, what kind of language you would want to use. And I don't know, that wasn't really a question, but just kind of a string of thoughts.
Yeah. I am, so when we think about school and like our model of school, we spend more time with our classmates during primary school than we do with our family. I think, and so because of that and appreciating and recognizing that, if the environment will support it, I will speak African-American vernacular English. To Emily's point, I'm not really in an environment where it supports that, but there have been times where it was important that I knew AVE. We have to do a trauma rotation, and there was a patient, an African-American man who I'm not sure why the police was there. I think we just have police officers in the hallway. I'm like in the hospital, excuse me. But he just kept saying, hold on, trap. You don't have to do that. Hold on, trap. You don't have to do that. And he just kept saying trap. And then the police officer came up and he was just like, is he about to assault you? What's happening? And I was just like, no, everything is fine. I am not in danger. Nobody here is in danger, sir. You can go do your police things somewhere else. And I was the only Black person in the trauma bay. And there were like 6 or 7 of us total. And when things like that happen, to my aunt's point, I feel like it's important that I stay attuned with Blackness, Black culture, because who's going to advocate for these patients? and who's going to understand what it is that they're saying if nobody around has an appreciation for the culture. I have never been in an interracial relationship, so I'm not sure what that would look like. My friend Michael, I do speak AV around him, and there's some time, like if I'm on the phone with a classmate, or it's truly like if I'm comfortable, then I'll speak in AVE, and there'll be times where he just have to say, well, Keiko, what does that mean? And we've had the conversation before, like, I will tell you what this means, but I'm not telling you for you to go and start speaking AV. It's so that you understand what I'm saying. Because there was this meme where it was like an AV meme, and it said "what's up" like 5 different times, and then had a different translation for each "what's up." And it just matters about like context, nuances, inflections, intonations. It's amazing.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Like, what a testament that story is to Black people need to be in every role that faces other people. Like, it is so important that there are Black people on the trauma ward, right? Like, I don't know, that everything you're saying is just like, yes, we need Black leadership everywhere that there are people, because how important to have someone to advocate for you when a cop is in your face for saying something that he's just like not familiar with.
Yeah.
Like, it's that benign. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Keiko, may I say something to you?
Of course.
One, I'd like to say thank you all so much for having her. She is not only brilliant, bright, and beautiful, but I am so excited to hear you speak, because what happens is the age difference when it comes to explaining our plight, you did it so well, and to be able to share it in this format, it helps us to really understand that others can receive it the way that you. I wish I had a copy of this of this Zoom, so that it really could be understood that there is, because of the timeline that takes place between when you say you did your book report on Malcolm X. I recently did a class, a Zoom with a 4th grade class, and I made reference to Dr. Martin Luther King. And one of the students said, "Did you ever meet Dr. Martin Luther King?" Right. I was tickled because the truth of the matter is, one, I'm not that old, but when we began to tell our story in this Black History Month, it really goes to show just how far we're not that far removed from the experience. So thank you so very much for sharing where you are in this Black History Month. I love you, girl.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
We just put this in the chat, but there is a recording of this that if you would like a copy of, we can get that to you.
Thank you.
One more question. As an educator, I 2 questions. One, how do people find you so that we may be able to possibly get you on a schedule for other great platforms as today, like today? But also, yes, thanks, Emily. Number 2, what tips, strategies, interventions would you recommend for other students, not just Black students, but students who are looking to increase their academic language proficiency, to increase their vocabulary acquisition? I know some things come by intelligence, but we definitely can prepare the environment for students or parents who are trying to address maybe some gaps so that they can too be proficient, maybe not as mastered as you are with your verbal comprehension skills, but what tips would you suggest that maybe you received as a student and a rising doctor?
So this is actually really interesting. I am dyslexic. Like, I have severe dyslexia. And I thought that it was just like, I thought I just didn't like reading, but it was, my comprehension is different. When I was growing up, if there was a word that I didn't know, I was charged with going to Webster's dictionary, writing the definition of that word 5 times, and then using the word in 5 sentences. And that is the basis of, one, my reading the dictionary now just to read the dictionary, but 2, my language. And to my aunt's point, my mastery of that language. I think that continually reading is important, because through reading, we will find words that we don't know and understand. And that is very important. I just put my contact information in the chat. Very astute point, TT. Those are both of my email addresses if anybody else would like to have a discussion like this.
Bring her on. She's the best.
Keiko, congratulations on this platform, on future platforms. It's good to see you. It is good to hear you articulate so eloquently and to spread knowledge, not just within the, I say Black community, but other communities, because I'm driving. So she just mentioned that it was recorded. So I'm sure if someone asks for this, they will actually get to experience you in more than just in the medical field, but also in this arena. So kudos to you and way to go.
Thanks, Mom.
Hello. I just wanted to say the same thing. Keiko, it's really nice to see you like doing your, and also I really like the organization. I'm all the way in Chicago, so I don't really necessarily have ties right now to South Carolina. But we did go to the same undergrad, and I really still have a soft spot for the state. But anyway, it's just really nice to see you talking, and also that you guys are doing this. Everyone has their own initiatives and what they're doing in their different communities. So it's always inspiring to see people that are have like similar missions, but working in their communities as well. Because there's Chicago, we all have like different communities and stuff like that. It's encouraging and keeps people pushing forward.
Thank you, student Dr. Hall.
I know I'm a lowly in too.
Sharice and I graduated from Claflin together, and then she pushed through this master's program, right? Like, did it in.
I did do that. I'm not saying I suggest that, but I'm just saying it happened.
Thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see you.
So I have a quick question for Keiko as well. So thank you for this again. And my question to you is, on a similar initiative, is there anything else that you want to do in the future along the lines of this kind of platform or this initiative, even in your residency program or just on a larger scale? I know you have your Instagram page and your Twitter, but is there anything else that any other like new heights that you want to take these conversations, just diverse groups and backgrounds that you want to see in the future?
Guys, this is Amakia. This is my line sister. She is graduating with her PharmD this year. I am unsure. I always love events like this. I'm imagining as I transition into my specialty that I will begin to focus on how race and medicine interact and intersect in urology. However, Black history, Black culture is something that I know I will remain fond of and will remain a passion of mine. As it stands, I don't have any initiatives in my mind, though. I'm sure something will come up. Something always comes up. Hopefully something organized does come up, though. I think intentionality behind this is very important. But the way that I envision the world being able to change is through platforms like this, but also through smaller conversations. One of our pediatricians here was in a room with like residents and other faculty, and is kind of a situation like you described, Emily, where someone made fun of the name of a patient. There weren't any Black people that were in the room. There are Black residents in the program, but they weren't at the clinic at that time. And the pediatrician that I'm speaking of stopped the room and asked, would you have made this comment if there was a Black person in the room? And no one said anything. And so I think it takes that sort of accountability and that sort of challenge on everyday interactions that'll actually help to change how people think, help them to unlearn things that they thought were jokes previously that are actually very damaging and harmful, and perpetuate and further stereotypes and aggression to the Black community.
Well, Keiko, we have been so lucky and honored and blessed, and all of the good things that you said yes to joining us tonight. I feel like we've all gotten so much out of this. And we would love to have you back in the future when we talk about medicine, when we talk about really everything. I feel like you are just like such an example of the way we're all called to live our lives, with like so much zest for life and so much zest for growing knowledge and like understanding each other. So truly, like from the bottom of my heart, I think I speak for Ellie and everyone else in our dialogue group about like, this has been just transformational in a lot of ways, and like in a lot of small but like really foundational ways. So thank you for that. I feel like you've given me a whole new language about like why we are doing this work to dismantle white supremacy, and like, I don't know, I'm forever in awe of you, but thank you for this.
Thank you so much for having me. And Chloe just said she's so glad this all came together. I am too. Chloe was incredibly integral in all of this, and she's how Emily and I got connected. So this is amazing.
Chloe is.
I second what Emily said for sure, and just in general, it's so amazing to have this platform to feature speakers such as yourself, so that we can both learn and get that information out there. And we're excited to share lots of the little nuggets of knowledge that you dropped today with our group, in forms of quotes and just in general, telling everybody we know how amazing this was. So just so glad that this, again, what that you just said, came together, because this was really, really, really amazing.
Absolutely. Well, to everyone else out here, you can, like I said, you can reach Keiko on Instagram and Twitter, and she was so generous as to drop her emails in the chat. Definitely jot those down if you are a teacher, if you're like a leader of any sort of business where you're doing training about everything from knee injuries, like I once had and needed Keiko's advice on, all the way to Black History Month, to like vocabulary, how to be like a more astute learner. She's, we've seen tonight that she kind of runs the gamut of incredible qualities that she would definitely bestow on anyone she came across. So reach out to her. Again, if you want to drop her some tips, her Venmo is there as well. Feel free to. And then Ellie and I do this every week online, and then have a speaker or a dialogue at least once a month. And we welcome any and everyone, kind of as the two of us and the others with us sort of unlearn a lot of the biases that we've held our whole lives, and kind of figure out what to do with them going forward. So everyone's welcome all the time. Feel free to go to unlearningracism.com, unlearningracismnewsletter.com. I said our own website wrong, but if you want to like learn more about anything that we're doing. And thank you all so much.
If anyone on here has topics that they are particularly passionate about and want to speak to our group about, we are happy to feature speakers of all kinds. So just connect with us. We're trying to move towards reintroducing the dialogue portion of this again. We've been kind of struggling timeline wise to get that all pinned down, but the speaker portion of this has been, in my opinion, really so incredible. So we'd love to feature speakers of all kinds.
Thank you for coming, Shay Shay. I'm so appreciative.
Love it. I'm finally catching up.
We appreciate you, Keiko. Thank you for being you.
I spoke about my god sister. So that is somebody that I met at Claflin. Her name is Chelsea Pinkett. And Shay Shay, I'm calling her my godmother now because it's been since 2010. And just amazing human, amazing person, just so loving and kind. You're just fantastic.
Thank you, Keiko. I love you, Keiko.
Oh, love you so much. Thanks for coming. My family's all here. It's so nice.
It's so good to see you, girlfriend. I had no idea since I moved away while you were growing up. I had no idea how smart and how on you were. You are.
Hey, Auntie.
I just finished talking to Angela and I was saying, were you on this with her? And she said, no. I said, well, why not?
We'll have to do the recording.
Yeah, because I said you and Savannah, you guys need to hook up. She needs a mentor because she is just, I don't know, with this online schooling, she's kind of lost some of her motivation. Yeah. So she needs some intervening work. So she needs a little help, a little encouragement. But I have to check out your Instagram page. I didn't know you had an Instagram out there because I don't have an account, of course. But I'll have to check you out. I had no idea you were into Black history. I know when I was experiencing the 60s, I had no idea what else was going on in the world, kind of young and kind of like separated. I didn't have a grandmother to tell me what was going on. So I was kind of in the middle of it myself, trying to find my way. So
listen, let me do some AAVE, Esther Watkins, better known as my auntie. Keiko's Black history lessons are lit. Listen, like,
really?
Man, what? I really want you to get this last weekend. We only have 28 days, so please don't miss the remaining 6. Well, today is the 22nd for me. It's the 21st for you, I believe. So yes, you have more days remaining than I do. Please go do yourself a favor and learn what they did not teach you back when you were a budding adult.
Yeah, we got the same 3. Of course, Martin Luther King was still living then, so we didn't learn about him. Not in school.
Yes, today's lesson, I was like, oh my gosh, my little niece is teaching me about someone I had no clue about, like no clue. You definitely have to put your pride down and then open up. Because I want to walk around like I am Black history. Not today, you're learning Black history.
That's what I'm saying. I am Black history and I know nothing.
Yes, thank you.
So this what you're trying to lead me to is on Instagram. Is that where your stuff is, Keiko?
It is, and I'll send you the link to my page.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, because like I said, this month since I've been stuck in the house with all this snow in Tennessee, and I don't even have a snow. It's